In this example, I want to take a look at what happens once we have our WordPress site set up and running on our Linux instance. So I have a LAMP stack, I have Linux, I have Apache, I have MySQL, PHP all installed. I went and downloaded WordPress, and I've configured Apache to look at my WordPress instance, and now I want to see that WordPress instance running and working properly. So I've started my Linux instance. It's this T2 micro instance, and I have this public DNS entry. And what I want to do is I want to connect to that instance. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring up a new tab, and I want to go out to that AWS instance. And what you're going to see is that this is a really slow process. And the reason it's a really slow process is because we're running on EC2's free tier, this T2 micro instance, and you'll see that I'm bringing up this cloud for developers. It's just another WordPress site, but you'll notice it's not even really running. It's connecting, and it's just taking forever to launch. And the reality is by using that T2 micro instance for EC2, and I get it, it's the free tier, so it's kind of convenient that we're there. What's happening is we're kind of overwhelming that server, and there's not enough server resources to actually serve up our WordPress site. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through how do we change our EC2 instance when we've kind of underscaled or undersized our virtual environment. Okay, so I would say right now our virtual environment is undersized in order to run WordPress. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to my AWS console, and I have this EC2 instance running right now. And what I want to do is I want to take this instance state and stop it. Okay, and this is going to take a second while it stops. Okay, so it's stopping. And what I really want to do is I want to change this instance type from T2 micro to T2 medium. Okay. And the one thing I want to point out is I'm stopping this instance because in order to make changes to this instance, it has to be in a stopped state. So what I'm going to do now is I have this instance, I'm going to right click, and then there's instance settings and instance state. I want to change the instance type. So right here. Okay, so I'm going to change the instance type. So right now it's T2 micro. I'm going to change it to T2 medium, and I know I'm going to pay more for this. And I'll probably just temporarily keep it as T2 medium. And I'm going to go ahead and apply that. Okay, so now you'll notice that that instance is a T2 medium instance, so it'll be kind of hard to tell which instance is which, but this is my Linux instance. I know that it was selected. I'm going to go ahead and take that instance state and start it up. Once that instance is started up, I should have additional resources allocated to it, meaning I have more CPU usage, more data throughput, input and output, and more virtual RAM. So now I have this public DNS entry. I want to actually connect to it. And now it's still going to take a second because the machine is still starting up. But eventually we're going to end up with our WordPress site up and running. And even this seems a little bit slow to me. What I want to do is I want to go over to my terminal and connect. Okay, and now I'm on that server. And one thing that I think is going on, and again, this is kind of a guess, is that this virtual machine's undersized in terms of actual disk space that's available to me. So right now, because I made it a T2 micro instance, what happened was the volume, the actual hard drive space that was allocated to me as a T2 micro instance, was 8 gigabytes. Okay, so what I want to show you is, and it looks like this is still initializing as part of the reason why it's taking a little while for my site to actually come up. What I want to show you is if I right click on this, I can start to see in the instance settings, and that's not where I'm looking. Sorry, I think it used to be under instance settings, but now it's down here at this bottom window. And this bottom window is going to have some information about which volume, and I'm not seeing the volume. So I know I have volumes there, but on the left-hand side, but I was thinking I also had volumes, and I guess it still stayed at 8 gigabytes. So because I'm running out of disk space, I think that might be part of the reason that my virtual machine is running fairly slow. And you'll notice it's still running real slow. I'm not sure why it's still running real slow, but my initial guess is that I'm running out of disk space. So what I want to do is I want to change this volume. So I can modify the volume to say I want 30 gigs of disk space. And what this is doing is it's using Elastic Beanstalk, which is storage, and I can modify it. I'm going to pay additional fees for each piece of data that I'm going to add here. So the 8 gigs is part of the free tier. As I modify it, make sure you want to modify it. It may take some time before the performance changes take effect. Yes, I want to modify it. Okay, so now that volume should be changed. And then if I go back over to my instances, we're running still. And it's a T2 medium instance state. Still looks like it's taking forever to load, and I'm not sure what's actually taking so long with the connection. I want to see if I can actually get into the administrative side of things. It seems strange to me that it would be running this slow. Okay, but it's a good kind of launching off point for where I'd make some of the EC2 changes. Okay, so now it's trying to redirect me to the login page, saying it took too long to actually get to that site. And honestly, I may have to restart the virtual machine before I'd start to see those changes take effect, where I'd start to see some performance gains. So what I want to do is I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to restart this instance, which may give me a different public DNS. But once it restarts, I think I'll see those changes. Okay, so I've restarted the EC2 instance, and I'm still getting poor performance on my WordPress site. And you'll also notice that my WordPress site's not loading my CSS. And then what I remembered was that when I do an install of WordPress, it also automatically binds that WordPress installation to your domain name. And because I'm using EC2 instances that I'm shutting down and restarting, my public DNS entry is going to actually change. So my WordPress site's getting associated with the wrong public DNS. So what I want to do is I want to update that. And I'll show you what I mean by that. And I have verified this on my EC2 instance. So I'm logged into MySQL, and I'm using my Cloud for Developers database. So I'll kind of get out of here and kind of show you that whole process. So I'm going to do a sudo mysql-u root, and I'm logged in. I can show my databases, and my WordPress instance is using this Cloud for Developers database. So I'm going to say use Cloud for Developers. So I'm using that particular database. And then if I show my tables, there's all sorts of tables that manage WordPress. So these are the 12 tables that are set up when you install a WordPress instance. The one that I'm concerned about is the WP options. So I have a query in my clipboard that says select from the WP options where option name in, the site URL, and home, and you'll notice it bound those two options to an EC2 instance, but you'll notice that my EC2 instance, does not match what's actually stored in my database. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that to my clipboard, and then I'm going to go ahead and run an update. So I'm going to say update option value, update WP options, set option value equal to that URL that I copied, and I don't want the closing backslash, where option name is in this collection, either site URL or home. And I should have two rows that are changed, and then I should be able to up arrow again, and now you'll notice that I have the updated EC2 instance. Okay, so now if I exit, what I'm going to do, just to be on the safe side of things, is I'm going to restart the Apache 2 service. Okay, and now if I go out to my WordPress site, now you'll notice how quick it loads. So my WordPress site is now running on a higher end EC2 instance. I changed the EC2 instance. I allocated more storage to my EC2 instance, and I've fixed the issue that I had with WordPress, recognizing the fact that, or binding to the fact that I had that IP address. If I want to pay an additional fee, I can say that my EC2 instance should always be attached to a specific IP address. And where I do that is under networking and under elastic IPs. I can allocate an elastic IP address. So I have this IP address, and then I think I can just bind that, associate that elastic IP address to my instance. And I can associate it. So now I have a public IP address, and that public IP address is not going to change for my instance. Okay, so now I have this public IP address right here. I can copy to my clipboard. And life is good. And now what's going to happen is I'm going to pay an additional amount because I've changed my instance type. And then I'm also going to pay an additional amount because now I have an elastic IP address. At some point, if I don't want to keep this around, if I don't want to keep all of these resources around, so for instance, I don't necessarily need my Windows server. I might want to get rid of my Windows server. I can come up and I can go to the instance and I can terminate it. And at that point, I would stop paying for it. Same thing with my Linux instance. So let's say I decide, this is just a class assignment and I wanted to see how to set up that LAMP server and how to set up WordPress. And I think I'm paying 60 cents a day for my EC2 instances. And now I'm going to get an additional fee for my elastic IP address. I could always terminate my Linux instance, but then I also have to make sure that when I go to my elastic IPs, I have to terminate that too. I have to actually be able to remove that so I can get rid of this elastic IP. Okay, so I can disassociate it and then I can release it, and then I would stop paying for it. So this is another resource within the AWS ecosystem that I'd be paying for that eventually I have to clean up and release if I want to stop paying for that IP address. Okay, so this is kind of where I wanted to go with this screencast, is just how do I change some of the options when I've undersized my instances. Okay, so I can set up EC2 instances and I can default to kind of a small virtual machine, But as I realize like I need more and more resources, I can allocate more and more resources. Or maybe I start with a lot of resources and I decide I don't need to pay that much for those resources. I can actually scale down those resources as well. And I can kind of manage my billing cycle that way.